Hi, I'm Laura D. Pusey. I'm the founder of Dippism Death in Practice, and this is the channel where we are talking the things on life and death, dying and grief. Okay? All right. So each week I answer a question, and in the last session, I was answering the question, should I tell them? Mm. If you have anything that you would like to say about that video, or if you would like me to answer a question for you, then send me an email at deathinpractice@gmail.com. Okay, hold on to your hats with this one because, well, it's going to be deep. Okay, we're going to be talking the things. Okay, and yeah, it might just be painful for some, but some things just have to be said. So let's open the veil of luminescence. With the intention of infinite truths, by the pulse of sacred light, I call forth the veil of luminescence. I anchor this veil in sovereign light to transmute and contain all energetic imprints, attachments, and residues across all realms. The material plane, where grief etches into the body. The emotional plane, where sorrow swells and purges. The mental plane, where stories of loss seek resolution. The astral plane, where echoes of the departed linger. The interdimensional corridors, where ancestral and cosmic threads intertwine. The parallel universes, where grief and grace mirror each other. This veil, woven of remembrance and radiance, is encoded with clarity to discern what is yours and what is not. Containment to protect your field, compassion to honour the sacred work of grief, transmutation to alchemize pain into wisdom. Let this veil shimmer between worlds, holding space for the divinity of each soul, the teachings where presence dissolves suffering, the soul's awakening where death births depth, the healing where grief becomes grace. This veil is not a wall but a sacred membrane, allowing only what aligns with truth, love, and remembrance to pass through. By the breath of the infinite, by the pulse of the sacred, I seal this veil with sovereignty and light. Okay, let's go. The word projecting is kind of new if you're not familiar with the mind and psychological narratives. Let's break it down in relation to grief, and you might find that you can easier understand the traits of projection and why someone might project onto you or you onto them, especially during times of grief. We can find ourselves projecting when we are carrying feelings that feel overwhelming or unsafe. When we put our feelings on others, we are projecting. For example, when we are grieving, we might feel furious about the loss, but not know where to put all of that anger. So we might perceive others as being hostile, insensitive, or judgmental, when really the anger is actually inside ourselves. Maybe we are blaming others, feeling guilty, and secretly feel responsible. In situations where a person is feeling that they could have done or should have done more, they might accuse others of negligence or wrongdoing, even without evidence. This can cause a lot of pain for those who were able to be there and do more. Let's also remember that grief often activates fears of more loss. For example, a grieving person might assume that others are pulling away, that they don't care, or they're tired of them, even when that isn't the case. So they may project through isolation. When someone has unexpressed sadness, they may note it in others when they themselves are actually the ones who are drowning in sadness. A display of aloofness or irritation at others is actually a nod to what's going on inside oneself. In some cases, we feel helplessness or inadequate. Feeling broken or unable to cope can lead us to see others as being disappointed in ourselves or judging how we are grieving, in which case we are projecting onto ourselves. Projection isn't manipulation. It's the mind trying to survive the emotions that feel too big. Projection increases during grief. It lowers emotional defenses. It disrupts one's identity and worldview. It can also activate attachment wounds. Okay? Now, with that said, let us remember that people around a grieving person are very likely also experiencing their own grief, discomfort, fear, and a feeling of helplessness. So they may project their own fear of grief by thinking or saying that you should be moving on by now, or you're milking it. This often reflects their own ability or inability to tolerate pain. Some people may project responsibility by unconsciously expecting the grieving person to get better quickly so that they themselves can feel comfortable again. If they haven't processed their own unresolved grief, their projection may manifest by reacting strongly, impatiently, or avoidantly, feeling or expressing that the grieving person is too much. On the other hand, they may see the grieving person as fragile, broken, permanently damaged, or incapable, even when the grieving person is stood up there in front of them and fully functioning. Let's look at the expression grief policing. I don't know if you've heard of that before. It's a recent one on me. I first heard it mentioned as such when we observed the distinct lack of what we would commonly describe as genuine emotion from the fresh, hot, brand new widow, Erica Kirk. If you don't know who she is or who her husband was, then make Google your friend. Make YouTube your friend. Better still, make Candice Owens your friend. At times, due to the nature of the death or the person who has died, we might want to freeze the grieving in their grief.
It's safe to say that at times we have an expectation that the grieving person would grieve in a certain way, maybe in a noble way or appropriate way, rather than as a real human. For example, look what William and Harry went through when their mum died. There was a lot of expectations on them, and now the presumption is that their grief is over and done with, even if their decision-making processes are directly affected by their personal experiences. The confusion that I observed between Erica Kirk and social media is that she didn't appear to be relatable or at all human in her grief. Now, I don't have an opinion on Erica Kirk, and thankfully I don't have to. She doesn't fall into my community, so she only serves as an example for a certain type of widow. Grief policing is when individuals or institutions monitor, judge, correct, or regulate how someone grieves based on expectations of what grief should look like. In plain terms, it's telling someone explicitly or subtly that they're grieving wrong. This is actually a very regular occurrence in the Western world, and one that people from the communities that I serve experience on a daily basis, whether they are actively grieving or not. Indeed, this is why I set up this channel, Death in Practice. It's why I set up FACFO, the Federation of African and Caribbean Funeral Operatives. It's why I set up Dipism, Death in Practice. It's a way of life. And it's why I set up the Grief and Loss community group. For people who look like me, commonly identified as Black, Caribbean, West Indian, of the African diaspora, born in the UK, within the global majority, gosh darn it, thank you very much, Mr. Booker. Our natural, unsuppressed grief is not neat and tidy. It doesn't fit into the generic Western model of grief display. Our grief is therefore suppressed. It's been suppressed for so long that we don't even realise that we're grieving anymore, or what we might be grieving for. We have often been told that, oh, it's been so long, it's been long enough, aren't you over that yet? This shouldn't still be the case. Why are you still angry? This assumes that grief follows a schedule. It doesn't. And let's not get it twisted here, my people. As I stated during a conference earlier this year, Black people police Black people. And that's because of the social positioning of Black people in the UK. Society can accommodate our quiet sadness, but not our anger, allowing quiet and dignified grief, but not visible grief, allowing tears, but not questions. Some emotions are treated as acceptable, others as disruptive. In the book Tapestries of Grief, one of my interviewees speaks about this with regards to the example that we have in the Baroness Doreen Lawrence. Within Black communities, in a bid to control the narrative, stem the pain, and minimize any undue attention to ourselves, we are urged not to dwell on the details. There's no point revisiting that. It won't change anything. You know what that is? That's control, dressed up as kindness. As a result of that kindness, many institutions in the UK have wriggled out of injustices that should have been afforded to victims. But, again, it's often Black people policing Black people, ultimately through projections of fear. This is especially common in deaths involving violence, negligence, or ambiguity. It shuts down the opportunity for justice and meaningful closure. There are people out there who have the pieces of the puzzle that can bring clarity, harmony, closure, payback, retribution, or justice to an ongoing situation. And they sit on it, muttering statements like, "It's not none of my business, nothing to do with me, not my story to tell." It is so incredibly harmful and so very dangerous. With regard to institutional grief policing, it is not by mistake that the legal systems prioritise closure over truth. They have the resources to exhaust your pocket, your time, and your energy. It's not about your colour. It's about their reputation and their survival. It's about money. The negligence of the diabolically overstretched NHS is innumerable, and for a good many reasons. Likewise with the police and the justice systems. At school, I was taught, and we seem to forget, that the police were not originally created to protect us. They were designed to protect the rich. And as many of us have been registered into the system, that makes us stock or assets of the rich through the institutions that we interact with, because we fuel the progression of this country by our units of labour, our productivity, our data, and our economic value. And again, I speak of this within the book Tapestries of Grief. Our workplaces grant sympathy briefly, then withdraw tolerance. As we would say in Jamaica, money athimek. This is where grief becomes inconvenient. It doesn't have to be a colour thing. It's a grief thing. Is it no wonder that some people struggle with their grief, especially within the Western world? Grief is universal, and it does manifest in many ways. But the system is not designed for your grief. It's designed for your productivity. I have said in many of these videos that everyone is grieving, and we grieve many relationships, losses, and failures, whether we know it or not. So let's just remember that when we are labeling someone as an arsehole because they're still going through their grief after a decade, or because they're bitter because they haven't received their rightful due, or they're unable to move on because others appear to have gotten over themselves a lot quicker. When we judge, we are making moral judgments on the grief of another, thus suggesting that their grief is unhealthy, simply because it makes others uncomfortable. This type of projection often disguises social discomfort as concern. Again, it is not at all helpful. You know what? Whilst writing this script, I've realised that we all police grief, and it's usually not out of cruelty, but out of fear of pain and unresolved personal grief. We desire order and predictability. We're uncomfortable with anger or ambiguity. We seek to restore normality and define the story in a positive light. But grief policing isolates the bereaved. It increases shame. It interrupts the ability to heal, integrate, and gain an inner standing or acceptance of the death. In the last session, I spoke about agency and how we show respect for others by giving them the ability to make their own decisions with clear insight. People don't heal by being corrected. They heal by being allowed. Grief becomes problematic to others right at the moment that it demands honesty, accountability, or discomfort. That's when grief gets policed. Grief policing is about protecting social comfort. It's not about the grieving person. Real support looks like choice, truth, allowance for mess, and respect for the different paths that we may take through grief. Okay, let's wrap it up here. If I have piqued your interest and you like what you've heard, please hit that like button and subscribe. If this video has touched you in any way and you need to share your thoughts, then let me know at deathinpractice@gmail.com. Please state clearly whether or not any of your email can be shared. And if you want a shout out, then let me know what to call you. If you'd like a one-to-one with myself or one of my grief practitioners, contact us at dippism.com. You can find snippets of these videos and upcoming videos on TikTok and Instagram and other YouTube channels of mine where you can leave your comments. The workbooks, Tapestries of Grief and My Life's Tapestry are available on Amazon. And finally, if someone you know needs to see this video, don't be a gatekeeper or a grief policer. Share this video with them. All of my links are in the description box below. And now, let us close the veil of luminescence.
By the breath of the infinite, by the pulse of the sacred, I honour the veil of luminescence now fulfilled. This veil, once summoned to transmute and contain, has held the field with clarity, compassion, and sovereign light. As the teachings settle and the soul integrates, I call forth the sacred closure of this veil across all realms. On the mental plane, let the body rest in renewal. On the emotional plane, let sorrow soften into spaciousness. On the mental plane, let stories find stillness. On the astral plane, let echoes return to source. Through interdimensional corridors, let threads untangle. Across spheres and planetary systems, allow contracts to be honoured and released. Let all residues now return to their rightful place, dissolved, dispersed, or transmuted by sovereign light. Let the veil fold inward, encoded with discernment to preserve what is true, containment to seal what is sacred, compassion to cradle what remains tender, and wisdom to carry forth what has been alchemized. This veil is reabsorbed into the soul's archive, a luminous record of presence, grief, and transformation. By the breath of the infinite, by the pulse of the sacred, I seal this veil with sovereignty and light.